The release of a news story describing a scenario in which ESL would have an exclusive league for Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which would feature a number of the world's top teams. And the idea is they'd be tied down, locked into playing in this league. And as a result, there'd be exclusivity. They would be exclusive to that one league and would not be able to compete in other tournaments around the world, effectively gaining a kind of monopoly on the best teams, or at least the ones that would sign up to this league, and creating kind of two worlds, like the other world of the other tournaments, and then this world that would have, ideally, in their world, the best teams competing for millions more prize money. That has to be said. This story came out. Now, the facts, the details have still yet to be fleshed out. It sounds like a lot of this is discussion and nothing's entirely been nailed down or is certain yet. But just based on the basics, it's obviously a very provocative topic. So what I thought I'd do is we'll just discuss this concept of exclusivity. Whether or not ESL is going to do it and whether that happens, that's irrelevant to the fact that it's an interesting discussion, because it's something that always needed to be discussed in the context of Counter-Strike, because obviously in certain other games there are degrees of exclusivity. The most locked down being League of Legends, where literally the best teams in each region do compete exclusively in those tournaments. Specifically in the West, Riot tournaments where you compete in LCS and that's it. And they might allow you to compete sometimes in an IEM, but in general, you're mainly only competing in LCS, the odd other tournament, and then the international tournaments that they provide. So this is the system, the LCS style. And the reason why this is always an interesting topic is because I feel as though people from other games, since they see how popular League of Legends the game is, and League of Legends esports has these huge viewing numbers, they automatically seem to have a correlation between the strength of the game and the viewing numbers and the system that's used, the LCS system. They draw a direct correlation from that and assume a causation of this sort of system in this particular fashion in an LCS manner, run like this by Riot, is what caused that. They take the causation in and they mistake correlation for causation, is essentially what I'd say. So they hope that if they put in a similar system, then they can emulate that success. They can make their game bigger, they can make their esport bigger, they can do all these things. Now, first and foremost, the reason why I make that distinction, that it's not necessarily a fact that this directly is a causation of doing it in this way makes the bigger numbers, is because that's actually been far from proven. It's taken for granted within League of Legends and by many other esports people and even industry people. But I've yet to see much compelling evidence that this is actually why the game is that successful as an esport game. Now, first of all, let's not forget, as a game itself, I don't think that esports is what made League of Legends the game with 30 million people, whatever the amount is. It already had millions and millions and millions when the esports side was really small. And this has always been an interesting point about League of Legends. It actually, even to this day, has a fairly terrible conversion rate of people that, of the amount of viewers amount of players they say they have in the worldwide player base, and yet the actual amount of people watching the live games, it's very low. I mean, even if they have 1 million people watching, like we just had 1 million at this last ESL one, kind of, he'd say, if they have 1 million in League of Legends, which they've had for huge tournaments, well, if they have 40 million people watching, that's a 40th of the people were watching that match. That's actually not very good. You go back in time, and I remember there was a time when, in the last big major for CS 1.6, the IEM World Championship, the 6th edition, they had 40,000 people watching the live final. Now, at the time, the viewer base of CS 1.6 cannot have been very high. Let's say off the top of my head, it was like, 80,000, 100,000? It can't be very many, and yet they had 40,000 people watching. So the actual conversion's amazing there. In a lot of other esports games, the conversion rate's a lot better. So my point here is that when you have that many people, 30, 40 million people playing the game, then to get bigger numbers is not meaning that your system actually is better. In some sense, you could say this is actually not a very efficient system, but you've got so many people play the game that you can, to a degree, brute force it, and it's possible you might have had success regardless of what system you'd used. Now then, let's also consider this. League of Legends esports side was growing year on year anyway. You go back to 2011, it's starting to get decent. 2012, it's skyrocketing with this open circuit. 2013, it keeps going up. 2014, it's going up. 2015, we're wondering now. It seems like some of the numbers have leveled off. But that's the point. If the numbers were rising anyway, the interest in League of Legends esports was rising anyway, then the fact that you switched system and the numbers kept rising does not mean that, oh, it's the new system that made it rise. Well, no, it was rising before, remember. So for all we know, if you'd have had those same open circuit like CS has now in League of Legends, maybe the numbers would have kept rising anyway. Hey, maybe they would have been bigger. Now, I won't go that far and say they would have been, because because maybe they would have been lower as well, but maybe they would have still continued to rise even if they weren't as high, or maybe they would have been as high and you've had a different tournament circuit, or maybe there is an outside chance they could have been higher because you've had more tournaments and you'd have had more international appeal of like Western teams going to teams with Asian tournaments still. Maybe there could have been other ways. The point is, it's still actually far from proven that that's the reason why it grew bigger. Now, the big problem with having that sort of exclusivity, as you'd imagine by the concept of exclusivity, is it pushes out other tournaments. So suddenly, I mean, IPL had died anyway, but suddenly MLG can't run their tournaments. I went to an MLG tournament in March of 2013 once LCS had begun. And what Riot did was they allowed MLG to have just one play day of LCS, well, maybe a couple of play days, but you know what I mean, like 1 week's worth of play days, and they could have like an amateur tournament there. And it was more popular for that than the StarCraft 2 tournament that was on the other side of the hall, which had some of the best players of all time in StarCraft 2 and in RTS in general. I had like Flash making his appearance there, Life was in his prime. This was more popular. So that tells me that if they'd have had a real MLG tournament there, like they had the year before, this would have had insane numbers of people going live and it would have had so much attention. But it couldn't because the LCS system limited it. So even MLG is limited to a degree. IEM can only have so many teams. That's why they only have those like 4 good teams in some of the smaller tournaments. And then they have to have like the 2 shit teams or the 2 local teams when you'd rather see like a bunch of really good teams. It limits those. So either limits other tournaments or pushes them out directly, pushes out other teams, because now unless you're an LCS team, unless you can qualify, you can just never, it doesn't matter if you were to get together the right number of players, unless you get through that very limited system of qualification each 3 to 6 months, you can't compete there. You can't break in otherwise. It pushes out players. If you can't get onto these teams, you might be as good, but if someone out of these 8 names or 10 names in terms of teams doesn't want to give you a chance, you can't get in now. You can't have a player come out of nowhere like Flamey style and suddenly he's now playing for like a top 6, top 7 team and he's having great performances. That's a lot more difficult to get in this system. It pushes sponsors out of the game. Now, here's where I've always been so suspicious that all these big organizations who love to control shit and be exclusive and keep people out, they're the ones who always go behind the banner of like, oh, we're doing this to grow esports. No, mate, you're doing it to grow your little portion of esports and purposely limit other people's. And yet when you say grow esports, that's grow esports as a whole. You're actually being purposely disingenuous with your concept there. It reminds me in terms of the way that they're removing the nuance of that term, like growth or growing esports, with the way people who are like totalitarian governments, they don't say, oh, we're here to control you and keep you down and do what the fuck we say or we'll destroy you. The real way they tend to do it is they change it so that they get a term that we all agree is good. Like, oh, you want our country to be secure? You want it to be, you want to be protected? You want us to keep out negative elements? And you're like, well, sure, who wouldn't want that? Oh, well, security to us means locking out all these aspects and making things very rigid and you must follow these rules. And if you don't, you're a negative element. So we'll keep you. That's what they do. They change the terminology. And so they might say they're doing it for security, but actually they might be the person threatening your security by taking away your rights or making you live a certain life which lacks the securities that you'd hope for in terms of what you wanted from your life. Now then, going beyond that, so the people who say they always want to do that very rarely tends to be the case. So the idea that anyone who says they want esports to grow, and particularly a game to grow within esports, would want to push out other tournaments which help their game grow, other teams which want to invest money and have players and have teams but won't have any point if they're in some locked out of it or they're in some shit league, they're not going to put as much in there, locks out players who could be very good and rise through the system in a free scenario and attend some small tournament and beat a big team. Instead, they have to go through this one system, and if they fail once, they might be done. It locks out sponsors. So literally, people are just saying, hey, please take my money, I want to sponsor this game. Oh, sorry, there's no spot for you, mate. We've got a sponsor in this rail, and there's no tournament here for you to sponsor, and this team's not in the league, so I guess there's no point sponsoring them. You're locking money and sponsors out of the game. The game itself is not going to grow as much. The scene of esports as general is not going to grow as much. I've always said, one of the things that I found so disingenuous about people saying League of Legends grew massively thanks to the Riot system is I remember looking at the early Dota 2 scene and then the early League of Legends scene. And the League of Legends scene was killing Dota 2 in terms of like amount of people watching, sponsor money, tournaments wanting to host it. Now, part of what allowed Dota 2 to get so big is actually directly the fact that Riot locked all the teams down and the system down into their LCS system. So all this money, all these tournament organizers, all this interest all just went over to Dota 2. Like, people were like, well, I can't spend my money on this League of Legends tournament. I can't run a League of Legends. Fuck it, I'll run a Dota 2 tournament. I'll spend money on sponsoring this in Dota 2. I'll sponsor this team in Dota 2. They're locking it out, actually pushed it off into another game. So actually, locking down CS now, first of all, could see money in a similar manner diverted into other games. And also, we'll just deny potential growth that could have been there. Because what I'm saying there is League of Legends might have been bigger just in terms of all that money getting into League of Legends instead of going elsewhere. And it would have been a bigger scene. Who knows? It will mean way less tournaments. And if you're a fan, that's really bad. Like, listen, I know the majority of the top pros in CSGO. They're not having a hard time living at all. They're making tons of money from stickers. They get a salary. They play all these weekly tournaments. They play tons of LANs. Loads of them are doing absolutely fine in terms of money and will continue to make more money as time goes on. The idea that they're just scraping by on pennies. No, that was like 6 years ago people were in that scenario on Counter-Strike. That's not the case now whatsoever. So, yes, the players might gain more money in the system where there's millions more. I don't deny that. But for you, the fan, and for me as a fan, or for me, someone who likes to watch the game, there's only almost negatives involved here. Like in League of Legends, where their system is like a split that lasts 3 months, and then another split that lasts 3 months. And yeah, now they're putting like one tournament between and there's the Worlds afterwards. But you only get to those if you're like the best team in the region. When they have this locked down system, we have to wait 3 months, then you get a playoffs that lasts like a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but 2 or 3 series. Think about that. Only getting to see if your favourite team's Titan or Na'Vi, okay? I picked those two because they're not like the top 2 who would qualify for like big world championships. So, okay, Titan and Na'Vi. Imagine you only got to see Titan and Na'Vi play in best of 3 or best of 5 series once every 3 months, and then they only got to play 1 or 2 and then they were out. That'd be fucking terrible. I don't care about group stage games that are best of 1s. I want to see them play awesome best of 3 series. Now, likewise, imagine that because of that, a player came along. So I'll pick an example, okay? I'll just make this up. So Flamey just joined Na'Vi, okay? We all saw that. Now remember, in his first series he played against TSM at Star Series 12, he fucking killed it, didn't he? He was awesome in that Dust 2 game. He dropped like 40 kills, and we were all like, oh my god, he's the new superstar. But then the series afterwards, he kind of shit the bed a bit, and now he's finally come back around at this tournament. Now imagine that first series, that first little run there, was the only time you got to see him in 3 months. And imagine that they'd actually lost that series. They actually won it in the end on the third map, but imagine they'd lost that map. And then he just goes out in the first round of the playoffs of this 3 month span. Now, you'd be saying, wow, Flamey's a god. He's like probably got one of the best players in all of Europe. But you wouldn't get to see him again for 3 months. Now, imagine otherwise, that instead, the series he played against Titan in the low bracket where he shit the bed, imagine that was the only series you saw there. And then you'd be like, what? Get him out of the team. Like, he can't possibly play in Na'Vi. And Na'Vi would be like, oh, he disappointed us and cut him. By not having enough matches to play, enough chances, you don't even get to develop the talent and see who actually is really good. Like in League of Legends, we had a case where CLG was like historically one of the top 2 or 3 in North America. And they had a player called Link, a mid laner, who had a lot of hype coming around him, and he was put into the lineup. And it took, I'm not exaggerating, like 2 years of him playing before people finally realised, as an obvious consensus, that he choked under pressure. Now you might say, well, how can that be? Well, no, don't worry, he was choking almost every single time. But the reason people didn't notice is because he was only playing one series here, one series in another 3 to 6 months later, 2 series, a year after the original one, but 6 months after that, and then another 1 series after that. And the reason why he's only playing like 5 series over these 2 years is because his team's getting knocked out in the first round. His team had other players who were struggling more, so he didn't really notice like, oh, he's actually a key problem there. In CSGO, we don't have this problem at all. If someone goes to 2 LANs in a 1 to 2 month span, we know immediately how good he is because he's going to play like 6 to 7 series. He's going to play multiple different opponents. He's going to play this week and then next week, so we get a chance to see, was it just a bad week? He's going to play multiple times in a row, so we get to get an average of what he's like and what he's like on certain maps and certain positions. All that goes when you've got this league system that leads into 1 playoffs. You lose all that as the enthusiast, the aficionado. You can lose an entire campaign tournament in the last week or the last day. Now think about this. Imagine that last year when Fnatic and LDLC were establishing themselves as the top 2 teams in the world. Remember that period where they both had placed top 4 in every single tournament? Fnatic was on a streak of like 6 or something and LDLC was on a streak of 4. Imagine instead that had been a league format. And so in the league, they play each other once or twice and yeah, okay, Fnatic wins, but Fnatic's top of the league, LDLC is second, and then finally at the end of that 3 to 4 month span, we get to the playoffs. And we're going to imagine, for the sake of this example, that the playoffs is actually... We're going to imagine that it's DreamHack Winter. Now, this doesn't work entirely for the analogy, because if it was really that they were top 2 in the league, then they couldn't play each other in round of 8. But for whatever reason, imagine they played each other in that match in the round of 8. Not in terms of where it was in the quarterfinals, but just that sort of game had taken place. Your assumption at the end of that match, ignoring the fact of the Fnatic boosting and that's the reason it got forfeit, remember the way the match played out. Fnatic won the first map heavily. LDLC won the first map impressively. Fnatic won the second map impressively. Third map, Decider. LDLC were convincingly winning it, then Fnatic did the boost. So after the forfeit, your natural assumption based on only that series would probably be like, oh, I guess LDLC is just the better team of the two. Like, they were going to win that third map. Fnatic had a good map, but they didn't hold it together. Whereas actually what happened in CSGO, well, before that series, we had them play at ESWC. Oh, let's go back in time before that, actually. Face it, Season LAN 2 finals. They could have met in the final, but LDLC they fell in the semi-finals to iBuyPower, and then Fnatic won that. That was their first big event win. Then the very next event, ESWC, the two teams finally met in the final. Fnatic destroyed them completely. 2 maps, easy. LDLC were humiliated. Then right afterwards, a week later, they met in the Fragbite Masters Season 3 finals. Fnatic crushed them 3-1, and even the one loss was 16-14. Well, no, it was an overtime win by LDLC on Inferno. So it's convincing wins by Fnatic so far. Then at DreamHack, first of all, the story's way better for the LDLC team because now they overcame all that to beat Fnatic at DreamHack. But secondly, you'd now know from those 3 series we saw and the tournaments as a whole that LDLC didn't make the finals of, okay, Fnatic's clearly the better team here. We got a much better sense, got more data, got more matches, we've had more amazing games to see, the context is more. You get none of that when you have that split format. In my analogy, where we only got that one match at the end, and we'd get a totally incorrect analogy for rather understanding of where these two teams stacked up and what was going on. You don't get proper matchups if you don't play enough times. Frequency and spacing and repeated opportunities to play each other, so the metagame between two teams changes in terms of this is what we did last time, here's what we're going to try this time, will we risk that map, will we try something different? Imagine if Nip and Envy had only played, say, 2 times in a 5-month span. So let's say it goes like this, okay? They only play the first time in the DreamHack Winter 2014 final. Let's say that was the playoffs of my first season of this exclusive contract, okay? Nip plays LDLC in the final of DreamHack Winter. Same type of match, okay? Remember how that match went? Game 1, LDLC won convincingly on Dust 2. Game 2, Nip won convincingly on Inferno, LDLC's map. Game 3, amazing overpass game, very close. LDLC just edges it. Now imagine that's the first series. Your conclusion afterwards, wow, these two teams are really closely matched up. And actually, bearing in mind Nip won so heavily on LDLC's home map, Inferno, and then it was so close, hey, maybe Nip's actually really close to them. Now imagine the second meeting between them in a 5 to 6 month span was ESL1 Katowice. Remember that semi-final? Nip crushed Envy, now as they're now called, formerly LDLC, on their home maps, Cash and Dust 2, with ease. Now, your conclusion after these 2 best of 3 would be, well, the first one was close, but LDLC just edged it, and now Nips crushed them. So clearly, between this span of time, Nips just figured everything out about LDLC. That was just an early upset. They maybe even could have won that one. They're a much better team than LDLC/Envy now. Except, what do we know in CSGO right now? Well, I'll add in the context, shall I? So after the DreamHack Winter Final, MLG final happened. And even with Nip having beat Fnatic and got there looking in the best form ever, they played out another best of 3 series. First map, Dust 2 again, LDLC won convincingly. Second map was Inferno. This time, NIP won in a narrow fashion. They just got to a third map. Third map, fairly convincing win for LDLC. So already we could tell, like, right, actually, this was more convincing by LDLC, so they're better than Nip, and they clearly, had, to some degree, have Nip's number. Then we had the Katowice one, so now we're like, oh, but Nip struck back. Oh, this adds a little wrinkle. What happened next time? Well, the next time they met, Envy crushed them completely in the upper bracket of Gfinity. Then in the grand final of Gfinity, they smashed them on all but one map that Nip narrowly won 16-14. Then at Starladder in the upper bracket final they played, Envy smashed them completely. Then in the final of Starladder, Envy utterly destroyed Nip, so that they won 9 out of the last 10 maps they played after the ESL1 Katowice one offline. So now what we know with all that data is Envy is much better in the matchup against Nip. Nip only had 1 series where they ever got the better of them convincingly. 2 series were close back when Nip had a different member, but even then, one of them with a convincing third map. And after that, it's been utter domination by Envy. But take away a few of those matches, the same other scenarios happen, and your interpretation, your natural conclusions will be so much worse. I've just shown you there the beauty as a spectator, as an aficionado, as a fan, as an analyst, of the open circuit versus a limited exclusive circuit. Now, if I told you, yeah, but even though you're going to lack all that, and you're going to lack all that, these players will get 3 times more money, and more people might watch the game. Why the fuck do you care as a fan? So because more people watch the game and there's more money, you get to watch less games, less good games, less meaningful games, get less context, less information to make conclusions on, and your conclusions are going to be more likely wrong. Well, how's that a fucking benefit for you? You're giving up loads there for something that doesn't even benefit you. It's nothing. It's also a scenario that when you talk about this full exclusivity, let's talk about levels of exclusivity. If you have full exclusivity, it's going to kill a lot of the aspects I just talked about there in terms of the beauty of the open scene and what makes it a really awesome game right now. I've described it right now as I think CSGO is the best tournament circuit because it's like tennis. In tennis, you have 4 majors, but we have 3 majors, and they're spread out. And between them, we have these sort of 9 to 10 little smaller tournaments, like they have in tennis, that at the same time still have most of the best players there, but not necessarily all of them. And so you get to see these 2 play on this one that they like, same as they have different surfaces in tennis. These others play here, and then they meet at the majors, and they all go for it. That's an awesome system. Why are we going to go away from that? Again, just to pay people more money, just to have more people watch. Doesn't do anything for me, mate. It's also unnecessary to do that if you're interested in growing CSGO and esports. In fact, I'd say it's almost imperative not to do that if you want to grow both CSGO and esports as a whole. If you're really the best, if you've got $18 million, why do you need any exclusivity? Why can't you, if you really have $18 million, establish yourself as the best by far? No one else has close to $18 million. Majors have 250,000. There's tournaments lower than that have like 60,000 and stuff. If you have $18 million and you're truly capable of doing amazing tournaments that would grow esports, fucking go ahead. No one's stopping you. Here's what you do, okay? It's not even that you have to help other tournaments. You just have to not hurt them. What you can do is you can host your tournament whenever the fuck you like. You can pick these dates. You can host it in whatever format you want. You can host however long you want. You can put up whatever prize money you want. And if you've done it the right way, you will naturally get all the best teams to your tournament. You can even host yours at the exact same time as another tournament. And if yours is better in all these respects, people are going to choose your tournament. Notice the team gets to choose. You don't choose that they have to lock in and then they can't have any choice. It's freedom of choice we're allowing, but they're going to make the choice for you because you're doing it better. If you have more money, better structure, more prestige, you take care of the teams, seems like you have a proper ranking system, you have better adjudication over rules and stuff, you will naturally be chosen. If you are actually better, there's a simple way to prove that, mate, on talent and actual hard work and performance. You know, those things that all the players have to actually prove themselves of. Not by just saying, oh, I've got the most money, so let me see how I can just fuck everyone and lock everyone else out, and then I can just like protect my own interests. There's even cases in the past. There was actually a scenario where CPL used to be one of the big majors, but they just started to lose grasp where now people were looking at ESWC, this French organization, compared to this American one, as like they're the new major for CS. And so CPL tried to go head to head with them and host a tournament at the exact same dates. And so what happened was all the teams that could went to ESWC and the other teams that were left over went to CPL. So CPL lost that thing there, but it wasn't like ESL made an exclusivity and said you can't lock into us and you can't play other tournaments. No, they just held a better tournament in all respects, and so everyone preferred ESWC, and it naturally it became the successor in terms of this is the real major you want to win. If you have market dominance, if you actually are the best, you don't need exclusivity here. In fact, the fact that you have $18 million, or whatever the amount is, this is a hypothetical in this scenario, since we don't know if that'll come true, but if you have $18 million, like easily over 10 times anyone else, and you can't put on the best tournament that the teams would choose to go to without fucking everyone, that suggests to me that there's some sort of insecurity there where deep down you must know that you're not as good. You must have something a bit sinister going on that you have to try and force money, force teams, force players, force organizations out of esports because you know that you aren't really that good. Like deep down, even though I've only got $5 billion and I know your tournament's only 10,000. How could I persuade you to come to my tournament? Well, I mean, with $5 billion, you could probably be better in every single regard. Yeah, but I'm probably not going to be. So is there another way I could make sure you come? I mean, I guess you could say I've got $5 billion and you can't have part of my $5 billion unless you only play in my tournaments. Yeah. That sounds better than actually, putting on tournaments, making them run properly, looking out to the interests of the players, and trying to actually have a really big esport. All those things that I say I want to do, and that really should be the job of someone in my position. But instead, I'll just use this money as a leverage to fuck everyone else in esports because that's how much I love esport. Like, what the fuck's going on here, guys? Also, as a side topic, people haven't really discussed this, but there's also an aspect of limited exclusivity, which is different from that. Like, I actually wouldn't be as against this as a concept. I am in general because I love the open circuit, but as a concept, I'd be far less against it if it was limited exclusivity in this sense. Say they were said, right, we're going to have an LCS type system, but it only lasts 3 months. And every year there'll only be one of them, and it's 3 months and then a big final. And what it'll be is it'll be the first 3 months of the year, then in whatever, April, we have the big final, whatever order you want it to do with. And the teams who are in this league are exclusive, but only for those 4 months. After those 4 months, there's 8 other months that every other tournament can run in. Face It, DreamHack, Star Series, MLG, ESEA, they can all run in the other 8 months, do whatever they want. All my teams can play in it, but as long as they're ready for our season and during our 3 to 4 months, you can't play in any others. That is now somewhere where now, hey, maybe I can make a compromise if you're talking about millions of dollars and it really is going to grow some aspect, because we're going to grow that and we're not going to lose the benefits of the other aspect. That would be different. In terms of overall exclusivity, I think it's really bad. I think it's a negative for people who actually care about the game and watching great matches, which at the end of the day, if we boil it down, forget the numbers, forget the money, what we really here for is to watch really great games. And we want to see really great games with the context. We want to have them battle each other before and then face each other. Like if Fnatic and Envy meet now, it's the context of all the tournaments where they've been beating everyone else that's going to make them play now better, rather than if they just met each other and there was no tournaments between. So yes, we need money to put that tournament together. Yes, we need people to watch, to have money and to have the opportunities to get money to put together this circuit. But we've already got the circuit. Why take away the good parts to get more money and more viewers? We're not going to get anything from that personally. So it's a totally different scenario in that situation. So overall, I think full exclusivity is very negative. I think limited is less so, and I'm willing to see some negotiation there. Like if they actually do it where, yeah, even though we're going to be selfish in this respect, we are going to allow this aspect here so that everyone else can still fit their way around it. And okay, tough tits that you don't have enough money to do that. But I don't really like this idea that just because you have the most money, you should like crush the game and control it. Especially when you're going to crush it, you're going to restrict it, you're going to control it, you're going to bleed it out, you're going to tell people how to do things, you're going to fucking end up, as in League of Legends, fining people, banning people, suddenly controlling aspects of people's lives, even beyond tournaments, and fucking setting up some computers and having people play a game. If you're going to do all that, it's not even that you're going to do all that, because that's obnoxious and horrible as it is, but inevitably it'll be done under the banner of like, and we're trying to grow the game and make it more professional, and we're making it like real sports. It'll always be the horrible tyrannical behavior done under like the nicest banner of these are the greatest guys who only have the growth of esports and the game in mind. Like it's all just a bit of bullshit, isn't it? So hopefully there can be some kind of reasonable path charted here, but I don't like the concept of total exclusivity for obvious reasons as I've outlined.